basically, this was more or less the interface. So we were able to edit a text files, adding a few metadata, editing these text files in many languages, and that's it. So it was very, very, very basic. And then at the same time, I had to work part-time on this project because it was still ongoing, and part-time on the new project, the World War I. So to save resources, save time, we decided to put the two things together, especially because there I was already working with a few researchers, sociologists. They were using the platform, and then we were building it together. We decided to add the same approach to reduce to minimalism these interfaces and doing things like complex things with other tools that I will show you later. Then basically this is the what I want to talk you today, a brief overview of the architecture behind the scenes, then the constraints or challenges we have to see how it calls on terms of data, so the delivery of data, but also the metadata coming from different collections. We had many issues, but also the translation in different languages. This need to be solved by many different choices. Then we will go directly to this tool reuse that for me is crucial, because it's always I'm always toward this minimalistic approach. So it's a reuse of tools that people already use, like Google Spreadsheet, but also Git in another way, and the adaptation of other, in this case was a content management system already existing, which is Django. Probably, I don't know if you know it, but it's a very light CMS that allows you to build up whatever you want. And then we'll just go to the last part of the presentation. Will be with this simple visual editor that they build. And we decide together how to solve the data problems behind the scenes to enable Sandra and other researchers to write the story. Because we will see the solution with Google Spreadsheet, but also the plain text files, not really digestible for humans, and then they need something to support. But also, since we didn't have any fixed data model, so any fixed box to fill our data into, having a visual editor just drives you not to do errors or mistakes. A way to go into the data architecture is, of course, starting from the very beginning. Sandra this morning talked about the 4 entry points. Before it was just the themes, and then they added the map and the timeline and the possibility of browsing the collection of pictures, videos, and audios. Let's say that the browsing the collection, explore the map, explore the timeline, had a different kind of problems which are related to the data properties, while the themes are problem like the data model. So how really to represent this in the digital world. So we worked together during a workshop in Luxembourg, and we came out with a very simple solution. So basically, the themes, the 4 themes that Anger and other themes are built of, are just an assembly of chapters. So it's a box where we put text files, basically. Each text file is more or less independent from the other. And the idea is that inside these text files we were able to put some modules that enable interaction between the text narrated and the documents that were shown in very different ways. So it needs to be handled this way. And then we have another simple relationship, was more or less like the database that you show this morning, like with the people and the source, the citation, which is one object, one video with another related video. We didn't go through to the details of this relationship, But then we decided to put the complex relationship to how the story is narrated. So how the chapter is composed by modules, and now we can also change, because during the writing of the team, she changed her mind. She wanted to show different documents, or not only a gallery, but showing the map of this specific subset of historical documents. So this is how it looks, how the themes looks on the website. So basically, hunger is just a title and a description, and then you have all the different chapters that goes deeply into the theme. And this is a very basic example of a module where you have on the left side the text, and on the right side they put this gallery. So the researcher is able to put whatever image they want, and then the user scrolling through the website, then he bump into it, and then he can decide to look more deeply into the details of the document. But then how to store this information into the database? At the time we had two different inspiration. One is the same as Taras showed this morning. It's Odyssey, which was very, for me, a milestone in this kind of experiences. The idea is very basic. You have a file that can be read by a human, where it details steps, slides. So you can see here on the right side your first Odyssey story. There are a list of things, like center, zoom, indication probably, and then the text. So a human can interact with it without touching relationship in a database. It's just really plain text. The format is Markdown, which is a format that was meant to be really, really simple for emails. And then the most interesting idea that Boss had doing this Odyssey was to transform and to put together the indication for the layout, so how he has to react to the user interaction, and the text itself. So you have everything into one place. So we chose to put this into our chapter models relationship. We know that the models, they are standalone, these narrative models, but they belong to the same story. So we decided to put this in the same file, basically. And we enable other things. So this is the second inspiration we have, which is Vega. We specify through this JSON object, so it's a structured file but still readable, specify the interactive visualization. At the same time, it puts the variable for the layout, to modify the layout, here on top left. And the data behind, so you can choose which data you want to show. And this is in the same space, even in the same storage space. But this is degenerated, this grammar, because we have different layout definition. So we can change also the behavior with the same data behind the scenes. This is done by Giorgio. We decided together with Sandra which were the best combinations. So it was really a combination games, having the text only or having the object in the background, etc. Everything was described in the same file, and so they could have access to it like this, because we just need a plain text files. I didn't have to rush to finish the CMS, so this saved my life. This is how we integrate, how it looks like the file that we give to them. We have basically a chapter which has a text already, so and then the chapter is a series of modules. I'm sorry that it's not very readable, but then for each object we were able to put the identifier for this object and as well the caption. So they were able to take the object, which is another JSON file, and play with it in order to build up the design. This is one example of the layout. So there is this part which is layout object text. You change this, it changes automatically. The system they developed change completely the experience the user has on the website. This is I think I forgot to delete this this one. This is the third type of relationship we had, from one object to the related object. So we have just an order of related objects. We didn't go into details on that. Then constraints. We have three kinds of constraints. We wanted to treat, not to have a fixed data model, so that we can put whatever we want into it. This is taken from the NoSQL database. The NoSQL is, you don't have relationship, you don't have tables, you put only the data, whatever they are, and then it's up to the database to understand the structure. This is used for big data and for unstructured, messy, and unpredictable data, like the cultural data coming from the different institutions, because we had to cope with different data format. There were also some historical resources that weren't digitized yet, so the scan and the compilation of metadata was done at the same time. So we really needed something that was useful for them to work on the website. At the same time, there was a problem of availability of this data. So while they were working on the data, probably they should add other resources. At the same time, they wanted to work on that. Third, most important, is that there were many people working at the same time on the same dataset. In this case, it was Sandra with a few students. The idea was also to not to let them write whatever they want, because this was the information that was put on the website, so she needed to control the words, but at the same time to translate it. So there were two translators that were putting data into that. So the solution had to be as simple as possible, because there were too many people and too many interactions. That's why we reused the idea behind Google spreadsheet. So basically the complexity of the things is taking the data from a Google spreadsheet and put it in our own database. So this is how it looks like. The problem of Google spreadsheet is that you have only columns and rows. And then we wanted also to put some depth into it, some hierarchy. How to solve that? Just with this double underscore, then all the complexity is on our side, on the CMS. We interpret just this part of data and rebuild the JSON file behind each line. It can be a picture or a video, and you can see here there's a few metadata coming from the data provider. Then we tried to squash a little bit, but also to respect what they wanted us to show. And then for us it means adding a column, so it was easy to solve. Then this is the design for instance for a picture. So you have the possibility of delivering zoomable images, and then you see in different languages the title and the description as it was described into the Google spreadsheet. And then you have all the additional information in a form, this is basic form of property value table, but ideally we can enact based on the type of the document, we can change the layout. So we always use the data as like raw data, and then we can cook whatever we want with them. This is then the question of data availability is more technical. I think I'll skip it. But then basically you have this Django. This Django CMS provides you with a basic text area that you fill. So there's no design, there's nothing. And then we fill it with JSON data. The database behind was able to digest this JSON data, so we didn't touch it. And digesting it means that you can build facet navigations, so you can select all the documents of type images, all the documents which have geographical coordinates, and then take all this and put into a map. And this was done by the API. So every interaction from the data to the front end was mediated by the API. So we decided to do it from the very beginning. And then this is how the translation workflow was integrated. So you have this data underscore description. So it means that there is a description field inside data objects, which contains English, German, French, optionally Luxembourgish field with a specific value. That value is encoded in Markdown, so we can enable HTML on top of it. It's a continuous loop. But then for us it makes, for the translator, make the work easier, because they had the context, so they had the English version, the French version, so they could translate more or less knowing what they were doing. We can translate bulk of objects coming from the same archive, and then you have all the lines aligned one by one. So this was really the best place to do this kind of transformation. But then the idea was also to have this always this minimalistic approach, and just adapt or hack more or less to find the better solution for our own problem. So this is just a list of the tools that we used. There is one project for publishing our scientific article, which probably you know is Autoria, where many people can collaborate on the same document, and everything is based on this system, which is a versioning system. And the idea is to use it as it is meant to be, so to store files. Then there is this NoSQL part of a relational database, the Google spreadsheet, then the REST API, which can also enable WebSockets. So you can interact with the same data in real time, basically. Just they will change. The changes are reflected into the website. Most important is the last one. We put everything is open source, but not only the source code, but also the discussion we had, all the issue we found. We kept track of everything. For them, it was a good way to manage their own time. For us, it was a nice way to say this is a priority thing, etc. But then after a few months, then you see all the issues that have been solved, the things that are there that needs to be solved. It's an interesting space also to do the management of the project. And finally, I show you how Calib.ro team decided to integrate this completely flexible data model with a very basic step-by-step interface for the researchers. Here you have a list of themes, you have a list of static pages on the websites where you can change the text, the title, and translate it. Here you enter a theme, and then I think I'm running out of time, but and then you can add chapter, you can publish, unpublish. This is something that we inherited from the former project, where we had the need to have drafts and publish the stories. And then you can also reorder them, since they are standalone and independent entities. Here you can decide more or less the layout for the chapter, but it's very basic, so they decided to keep it the minimum. So it was a kind of negotiation between the researcher and the designers there. They decided really to put a color palette which was limited, and then if you want to do something more, then is where you have to hack the system and just put the code. In this case it's simple, it's just the color code. And then it's something advanced if you want to do it. This is how a chapter is then subdivided into modules. You can see here there are different type of modules, so you can just change the type and then the visualization change accordingly. You can have text and object, text, map, the different combination we saw. And this is how this simple example is the gallery module can be modified by a user. So you have the text, which can be we can have highlighted some entities. In this case is Michael Welter, and then on the website you will get the tooltip about who Michael Welter was. This is done by linking a portion of text with another document. In this case the document was a person, an entity, this Michael Welter. And then on the right side you have, since you've selected a specific layout, which is text gallery here, then you have the possibility of adding object, adding document to the gallery. So everything is in a sequence. It's very, very simple, not to commit any error. Okay, I think, are there any questions or wasn't clear enough?
I just love to comment that it's very interesting how they actually created the interface, which is the kind of meta interface of it, which is seen on the website, and it's really exciting how actually you imagine this situation, how all you could collaborate together, and how much time actually you could save for yourself. You're also nervous maybe, but it's a really interesting system that you imagined. I think it's really exciting. So any more questions, comments? They're all excited.
Maybe after another presentation.
Maybe at the end.
Yeah, at the end after the second presentation.
Okay, but just some may forget what they imagined in their minds. So now we could see how actually the skeleton and the muscles of the idea, my idea. So now it's about how to make it look, work, and to be represented. So the second presenter is Giorgio Uboldi. Giorgio worked as a research fellow at Density Design Research Lab from 2013 to 2015. Before graduating in 2008, he was selected for the MEDES, Master of European Design, and he spent 1 year in Cologne studying at KISD, Kyoto International School of Design, and one of the ENCSIS atelier in Paris, where he could experience different design approaches and develop his skills in different fields of communication design. In Paris, he also worked as an intern at H5 and Atoma Design before coming back to Milan to finish his studies and collaborate with the Density Design Research Lab. He founded with Matteo Azzi a new design studio focused on tailored data-driven experience and research called Calib.ro in 2016. Should I add something about Calib.ro? I have a few sentences, but I really encourage you to visit the webpage. So Calib.ro is a multidisciplinary design studio established in 2015 and based in Milan, in Italy. They are interested in exploring new pathways at the intersection between design, data visualization, and humanities. They use the potential of data visualization and information design to provide innovative and engaging visual tools for clients, users, and researchers, embracing complexity and aesthetics. So the title of presentation is Designerly Approaches to Digital Humanities Projects.
Thank you very much. So as has been said before, I'm part of Calib.ro. I'm one of the two partners of Calib.ro. We are a small design studio. We sometimes call ourselves like digital artisans somehow. We push pixels, we build digital interfaces. And our main focus is on projects that are heavily data-driven. It means there's somehow, again, like as artisans work with different materials, our favorite material is data, as a starting point for our projects. And usually when we are approached by different institutions or clients or researchers, there is always these questions. So what's your method? How do you work? What are the best practices? What is the best visualization for this kind of spreadsheet, this kind of database? What's the best way to explore a photographic archive? Kind of questions like this. That gets to the question what makes it work somehow, a project. And I don't want to be accused of being a relativist designer, but like, it's always about it depends. The answer is always it depends. It's never, there's not one answer for all these questions. It depends on many factors. The context of the project, the goal of the project, if there is any goal. Sometimes there are projects that don't have a specific goal, and actually they are most interesting. The constraints, economically and technologically, what are the data available, or what are the knowledge of the data that is not available or missing, and who is the user, if there is any specific user in mind. And starting from that, I would like to present how, like in 3 small chapters, how, according to the project, we took one decision or the diametrically opposed decision. So, for example, one case is like when they ask us what's the best way to interact with interactive visualization when you have a lot of data. One of the main and the most famous mantra, it's called mantra, exactly, of visual analytics and visual design, it's by Ben Schneiderman, is overview first, zoom and filters, details on demand. So you have something, an archive, a corpus, you make it more manageable, and then you ask for details. And usually, I don't know if you know this interface is Gephi, to visualize networks, and it works more or less like this. You have a big network, you filter it somehow by some attributes, and then you look for some details. And it's also very similar to, for example, what we did in the part about the map in the Great War project. We have all the events, data that can be georeferenced, and you have the possibility to zoom in the map, filter it by type or by date, and then you can get details while you click on the object. Same thing for the documents archive. It's more or less like this. Maybe you don't have a really big overview of everything, but you have everything there at the beginning, and then you just filter and you look for your research question. And we did another project that is out of the screen. I mean, it's like more in an exhibition space where we had a lot of interviews made by this collective called Anthropocene Observatories, where a lot of interviews about to people that are somehow involved in the discussion about what is Anthropocene, what does it mean in terms of ecologically, in terms of science, in terms of society. And so we had more or less 4 hours of videos, and the researchers, through this software that we didn't do, but Robin, a collaborator, did was to transcribe all the part of the videos and tag all the single part with pre-established keywords or geographical entities. We explore the co-occurrences of these tags. So when 2 tags are in the same paragraph, it means that they are connected. And then we decided to approach this mantra through a 2 screens experience. On one side you have the visualization of all the co-occurrences of this network of tags, and on the other side you have a way to select them on the tablet, and basically you, going again from the overview, you select just the parts of the video that talk about a specific thing, and you create your own playlist, and then you can look at the interview, so go from a distant reading to a very close reading, or listening actually, of the interviews. This was actually one of my first projects in terms of digital history. It was my master part. My project was a small part of this big collaboration called the Mapping the Republic of Letters. And it was a very rough encounter with digital humanities, because again I was coming from this idea that okay, there is a best principle to visualize data, that is overview first, search, zoom, and details on demand. But here again, it's the whole Milanese team that participated in the Mapping Republic of Letters. But actually the data sources are not what you expect when you don't have experience with historical data. There are a lot of different sources. This was one of the sources that they used. It's like an archive of correspondences between intellectuals during the Republic of Letters period. But there were other kind of resources. So for example, mentions in this atlas, this dictionary of British and Irish travelers in Italy. So basically description of where people went, which event they took part in, which people they met, and so on. So very really difficult data to put in a table, let's say. So they were explicit relationship, someone wrote a letter to, someone is related to, or met. But also not really explicit relationship. So probably they were at the same time in the same place, probably. They would participate in the same events, probably. So like, I mean, history. And the first thing that we did is, together with them, we did try the already existing tools. So the same interface I showed you before. She's smiling, seems happy, but actually what we realized is that it was a bit limiting. It was not really following, it was just putting like something taken from other disciplines and applying to history. So there were advantages, like this kind of approach had advantages. You can see like clusters and communities when you have a big network. You can have a really some insights from the distant reading. But you have limits in the exploration, you have poor insights about small communities, you have it's like looking at a low resolution picture somehow. You don't see the details, you don't grasp all the nuances of certain relationship. So we try to go from the opposite to the opposite of the mantra that we showed before. So if before was first the overview, also quoting from this research paper, we did the opposite. Search, show context, expand on demand. So the idea, and this was the prototype of this project of NOT, was to start only from one element in the data set, that was in this case one person, and then ask, okay, give me all the information related to that node, and so on. You start expanding, rather than going from the global, go to the details, you have a different approach. That I don't know if then was correct or not, but we thought it was a better approach for historians, or at least we interpreted it as something that they were looking for. And then you can filter by the other dimensions, for example, these were occupation and so on. This is first case, so like how we took two different approaches, very opposite, into different projects, and it was related about like interaction patterns. This is more maybe technological, and sometimes when when you start a project, it's really like an area of choice. You have to make decisions, and also as Daniele was saying before, like you have to take, okay, what do? I use something that is already there. I build something from scratch. And again, we have here two examples. Here, this was like not really academic work, but was coming from a group of architects, an architectural studio. They had a really basic request. They wanted to do an app that functioned as a guide to contemporary and modern architecture in Milan. And this app and the data for this guide was not coming only from one person, but to the whole team. It was a collaborative guide about architecture in Milan. Okay, we were asking, so we have to build a CMS and then teach all of them how to use them. I mean, how we can create a process that is seamless and somehow frictionless. And we noticed that everyone there were using Instagram. I mean, everyone knows how to use Instagram. And we decided to take advantage and exploit the big giants of Silicon Valley. And we taught them how to use Instagram as a CMS. So basically they had to georeference the picture in order to get the coordinates. And then they had to write the titles of the picture divided by pipelines. So each pipe was a different field in the app. So we see that, for example, the description is contemporary, hashtag contemporary becomes the category in our app. Then Museo del Novecento becomes the title, and so on. And we were doing it basically every time there was a new picture, we were downloading it and putting in a separate source. And this source was feeding the app, the mobile app. And then the user could explore this guide through different filters and with their phone. So again, we used something that was already there, we just acted. And it's limiting sometimes because it's always difficult to describe something complex using something that was meant to be for something else. While, as Daniele showed before, the concept behind the visual editor for the World War I was the opposite, was to let's do something from scratch and let's do something that can be expanded, that can be flexible. So as Daniele was showing before, the visual editor was part of it, behind all the logic that Daniele explained. And I would say that it actually has been a good choice, because then we are working on a new project with the University of Luxembourg, and we are just expanding this solution in order to make it suitable for another project and another kind of data. Here, for example, are the translations. So this was the second one. So about choices and that you do in terms of technology. There is no right or wrong. It's just about the context and the goals and what you want to do. The third one is about something that I heard this morning a lot about, like targets and users and so on. I think there is like this guilt of designers and this of bringing these design concepts to other disciplines. I feel like a little bit guilty of that because I'm a designer. By like this old design thinking, think about the user and so on, that is taking place in all the disciplines that maybe are adopting them, but maybe not in the right way. I don't know. Just sometimes I have question about what design affects, how design affects other disciplines. And I would like to show like two examples. One is like when we decided to do a very shared and participatory design with the users and other stakeholders, and another one that is the opposite. This one was like some pictures of the workshop that we did in Stanford to work on and prepare what I showed you before. This was a younger version of me, talking with the researcher, try to understand, try to get as much as I could from them in order to then propose to them something and then collaborate on that idea. It's about a lot like drawing together, it's a lot about sketching, and it's very useful, especially like if you don't, as a designer, you don't know nothing about the topic. It's the best way to get to know the topic. Like at the beginning for the World War I was essential for us because we didn't know anything about the First World War in Luxembourg, and it was actually very important to know in order to develop the project. Then the confusion can be, the communication can become a little bit confusing when you want to involve all the stakeholders all the time. There are like people and messages, different ideas, and at a certain point it can become like something that you don't, you regret of it. Or it just becomes like too complex to handle. But again, I think it's very useful, especially when you get to know something for the first time. Again, like this is, for example, in Luxembourg for the new project, it was also very nice for us to look at the archive, at the material stuff, not just looking at the files. And it's very important and it's also very nice for us when we work with people that comes from completely different disciplines, because it enriches us a lot and makes workshops and meetings much more interesting. Now I go to another example, and it's a project that we did I did with other members of density design when we were at Politecnico, and it's just a project that was born because of our needs. The lab was involved in many projects of data visualization, and there was like in the team there were people that were able to code, people that were just able to code a little, and people like me that actually I'm not really good at coding. But we were all part of the same process. So it was all about like finding I mean, a lot of times it was like me asking for something to another one and so on. So there was this process was a little bit slowed down, and usually our process was this like very iterative process, going from the topic to the data to sketch and so on until you find something that is interesting that can become the output. And in this process there are a lot of tools, but there was something that was missing. So we worked, especially led by Giorgio Caviglia, we worked on a colleague of Density. We worked on this project called RowGraph that was really born as just a side project for us. That it was a tool to produce semi-finished vector graphics, so just really rough sketches of visualization, but at least was not putting a barrier to people who can code, to use certain visual layouts that were available with D3.js. So this, after a while, we decided that actually it was a nice project, even if we didn't ask to a lot of people feedbacks, we didn't do a lot of user research, we didn't ask for to ourselves who are the target, who can use this thing. We just decided to put it there, and it works in a kind of easy way. You just have a spreadsheet, you copy it, you paste it. I mean, this is a small spreadsheet, but it works with those more complex ones. You just paste it in the interface, you have some weird visual layouts that you are not able to do it with Excel or other tools, and then you just map the data variables with the visual variables of the layout of the chart, and you can create a chart that is in SVG. You can download it and then work in Illustrator or integrate in another piece of code and so on. And actually that, I think, it's one of, I mean, now there are somehow 800, 900 users per day. A lot of them are people that we never thought they could have been our target. A lot of researchers. I think I just checked, we did a survey, they were like 30% come from universities of the people who answered the survey, and a lot of them were historians, and it was like something that we didn't think about at the beginning. So again, like maybe like these principles that are really designer principles that are now spreading everywhere, sometimes we have to ask ourselves if they are really the right choice for the project, and we have to understand if sometimes we just forget about it and we just do it as we want. Thanks.
Well, as you all could experience, there was very nice and cool presentations, which actually gave us a very nice outlook how, I think my idea, I was listening to those of you, was that because one of the questions that we had previously on working something here, there was actually what digital technologies, you know this question, but actually digital technologies may add to our understanding, researching, representing, finding something new related to the past. So how can we use it? So I think in your cases, in both your cases, it's really really interesting to see that actually, yes, it does. So and that can be very interesting outputs about raw graphics. I use that also. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Because it's a very nice tool. So and also you see how the data might be not only somehow narrated, but also to be also comfortable, you know, just to access to it and to make some your own conclusions of it. Because it's if they can teach you something new, that's really cool. And if it can teach you or give you opportunity to get something more about some challenge or some theme topic, some possibility on media, some technology or some solutions, it's really cool. So thank you so much. Questions?
There are some. Yep.
Thank you for this wonderful presentations and this overview of this kitchen that is usually invisible. My question is for you, Giorgio. And somehow it's related to issues that you mentioned. You mentioned that algorithms could be misleading, which was one of the limitations. And you also use the Instagram platform for developing of one of your projects. So actually, when you have not a ready-made platform and you have a specific algorithm which are used there in Instagram, so what are actually the limits of using something which is now bought by Facebook as well? So having all this invisible algorithms, and how do you adapt to this issue? Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you have to always pay attention. But I mean, in our project, we were really using the basic function of posting something geolocalized. So we were not really dealing with the algorithms of what is shown on Instagram, who can see, who doesn't see, something like that. Because then we were just taking back the content and putting in another app. It was just actually having Instagram as a visual CMS for an app. While, yeah, I think it's a very interesting to see how sometimes I saw some humanities or history projects that use social media, like a lot of, I've seen a lot of Twitter, for example, pages that like do live tweets of something that happened before. I think they are interesting because they use the potential again. They just use the potential of a platform, and so it lets you save a lot of resources. At the same time, you have to think about like I'm putting something on something that has been designed for something else, has been pre-established by something else for something else, and I'm just following the format that is maybe it's not the best format to tell something that is more complex. Maybe just simplify everything. Maybe, I mean, not reducing, but trying to fit an event into 140 characters. No, now it's 280.
Yeah,
now you have the double. You have 280 characters. It's you have to think about it. Just be aware of it.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentations. Actually, I have a question after the first presentation, and that it can go to the second one. With this website, actually, you for the first part and then to the second, I have a question. So I see that you do the design for the layout of the website for the users of the website and customers, and then and also you do the all design for all the inner part for the people who do for research or for workers or the project, and it's designed so well, and it looks also similar maybe for me visually. So I just see that it looks like one big project, the out side of the website and the inner this part. And I have a question: what do you do first, or what adapts first this inner part for the user as me and the worker of the project? I put the information and then you think how to show it for the auditor generally, or it goes for the visual side for the auditor, then you think how to make it also more useful and simpler to work with as a workers.
I'm really tempted to say it depends.
Maybe I'll jump into this question because I was also wondering about this visual editor. What was the? It's really done really well, and it's interesting to see it. And my question, just follow-up question, would be: was the purpose of doing this visual editor only for some people who upload the content to the website, so basically to make them easy for them to prepare and upload this content, or there are any other purposes for this visual editor which is internal?
So yeah, going back to the first question, this, I mean, the idea that everything inside looks like the outside is actually because we wanted to have what you see is what you get. The principle. What you see, what you get interface. So Sandra and other people that were working on the themes were able to see exactly how it would look like that. So that's why then everything looks like so homogeneous.
It's it's so rarely in such a hard, big project. It's rarely when you get so good insight interface to use. So it's very great.
Thanks. I think it's. I mean, the process went very smooth in that part, so we didn't have to iterate too much. And when you, I mean, iteration is good, but when you iterate too much, you things are half broken at a certain part.
You start looping.
Yeah, you start looping. So this time when we had like the right amount of iterations in order to get to where we wanted to be at. So it went. I mean, everything was smooth. That's, I think, the look and feel is a representation a little bit of how the process went. It's like when I work on front end or the look and feel of something, when the process gets too many reviews or feedback, either you start from the beginning, or like you just put patches, and it's not like homogeneous in the end. I don't know. I think also in terms of also like the part that about the data itself, like the whole process went quite smooth.
Yeah.
And also in the data part, there are no patches in order to fit the interface and the other way around. There were no patches in the interface to. It's also because we had time, I think. We had how long? For how long we worked?
6 months.
Well, it wasn't that long.
6 months, and then a
six-
little bit more about the
6
product.
months and then
Yeah.
a bit more.
But 6 months in design world is a lot compared to what they're like. What?
In 2 weeks.
Yeah, there are crazy deadlines sometimes.
My question is again about the kitchen. So as I understood, maybe I'm not correct, the structure of the project when it comes to the First World War in Luxembourg looks like there was a Sandra, and then Daniele, and then Giorgio, as I'm right, in this communication line. And then my question comes from the backside. Sandra mentioned debugging. So actually, how do you do debugging in this, I don't know, whether horizontal or vertical communication system? So my question is how actually Daniele works with Sandra and then back to this Giorgio. And my second question is about the possibility of using, maybe you in Calib.ro encountered this, this generative adversarial networks which can produce output on the basis of neural networks interaction. So you have data, and then they can compete, and then we can withdraw the scholar from the system, and then to have some output as a new research project made by the machine. Have you encountered something like this? Thank you.
Well, if I can add something, it was a collaborative process. It wasn't a linear process, and it was made of several. Sorry. It was a collaborative process, and it was made of many, many interactions. So we had a kind of rough idea of what we wanted, which is what we stated in our call for tender. But then the whole design process happened together with them, and it was again, we were hearing their suggestions, they were hearing our problems. And together we were trying to find solutions. So it was this kind of ping-ponging. It wasn't a kind of linear process. It was never a linear process. And it was made also of, as I showed before, of also decisions that at some point were ditched because we realized that they weren't working the way we wanted. So I guess that's kind of part of any project that, that's, there's always an element of iterations and corrections and adjustments as you go, especially given the complexity of the project. The fact that, again, we were dealing with very complex data, and we were trying to find a way that was, again, digestible and suitable.
And with debugging, how do you work?
Well, the debugging was really the very last phase, and eventually when, obviously there are small things that, technical problem, like at some point we had the images were all displaying blue, and we had no idea why. It turned out that it was the scanner of the National Archives that was adding some sort of, and they Giorgio managed to find out what it was and kind of cleaned up all the pictures and re-uploaded them. So, you know, this kind of small, and then stress test and you know, this kind of thing.
So you didn't have any kind of test groups which test?
Oh no, we did. We did have also, well, we had actually two main, well, one was early stage. After we kind of set on an early design, we had just some colleagues willing to be the guinea pigs for the, and we showed them the, you know, the mock-ups, and we heard their feedback, and then we made some small adjustments according to what we had. For instance, that's when we had the initial plan of having the map and the timeline as modalities of viewing the collection. And that was, for instance, ditched at that stage because people were very confused by it. And then there was one last kind of test towards the end of the project, where we actually, you know, we had a series of people going systematically through a number of you know, usability tests, or how you know, zoom here, see what happens, is it working smoothly, and then kind of adjusting accordingly. So this was, but maybe you want to add something.
Yeah, and then the part about debugging, I think that at the end, when we were really in a production phase, we used the GitHub and this way of documenting the bugs and the stages, and it was also, Daniele was saying before, they adapt a lot, I think.
Also to structure and regrouping needs. This was also another hidden task but was pretty important. You start putting all the feedbacks together, and then delegate it to Giorgio only by package, not one by one. This was also something in between, behind the scenes that you didn't see, but it happened.
Also prioritizing what was critical and what was just a cosmetic thing. You know,
Like many in our projects, we don't encounter GitHub. Can you elaborate a bit more about the GitHub? And
it's a platform that allows to host repositories of code, so projects. There are code-based, but like actually you can put whatever you want. You can put a book.
Even laws, they start like in France. They start putting laws into this Git repository. So you put really text files, and then you see the amendments. So who changed what and when. So this is how you follow.
And you can always
put whatever you want.
You can always go back to the certain version and just change what someone added, not the whole thing that has been added after that mistake, let's say. And then what we use mostly, I mean, it's where the code is and where we were putting everything in the code. But the function that I was saying is this issue, is like an issue tracker, where you just say, oh, there is this problem, it's not solved, and then someone take care of it and solves it. And it works well, especially also for open source projects, because then you can just do like an open ticket and someone else can... it could be interesting to see also, like in humanities research can be like the same idea like before of using Instagram for something else. Try to see if the GitHub has something that in terms of research allows you to do, I mean, improve or anyway just change the way you do research. I don't know. Maybe there are some experiments already. I don't know.
For the moment I'm using it for other colleagues in the center, because there's also the possibility of publish a website with this platform. So you put your text code there, and then you have the possibility of having this blog, very, very basic version of a blog, but then with all the versioning, so you see all the different versions, and then you can go back, revert to a previous version of your text. Was an experiment on the Darwin's Origin of Species. Like he wrote different versions of the same text, so you have many publications, and then they use this to see the differences, because you can see difference line by line. So this is very useful when you do code, but it can also be nice when you're doing literary research. So you just compare two versions of the same text, and automatically the system show you this changed, this stays the same. This was added. Those are the three main features.
Sorry.
The second question.
Yes, about the artificial intelligence. Can we get rid of historians?
No, I mean, we don't have a lot of experience in that. We just did one project where we put all the pictures from Airbnb in Milan to this algorithm that recognize objects in the images, and we built catalogs of furniture that are inside Airbnbs. The only use that we did of this kind of technologies. There were a lot of IKEAs, the main site. There were a lot of mistakes. They were actually interesting to see the mistakes. But then I don't have, like, in terms of the automatization of knowledge production, I don't feel like I have the knowledge to answer, and I don't think.
It's thank you for mentioning about this project with Darwin on GitHub, because well, GitHub is probably something quite obvious and widespread for those who do code, but not for those who do humanities or digital history. And maybe this is it's really good that it was somehow emphasized here. And for example, historians who didn't know about GitHub, now they know that it exists, and maybe there are also some opportunities there. But my question would be, well, basically I want to ask you, it relates to both of the presentations. I want to ask you about, well, this transferability of those...
Oops.
Hope not. Very much.
This is when when you do digital history project. When you do digital history project, it could be some problems with technology. So I don't know. Maybe all technical stuff will figure out what is happening. Probably some power outages. But maybe I'll continue my question, because it still can be said without any technical devices. So I was curious about this transferability of solutions that you used for, let's say, the project about First World War in Luxembourg. So maybe I put this question in very practical terms. What if, let's say, you mentioned that all the open source, all the code that was used for this project is published open source and can be used somewhere else, repurposed, and you use also API. So basically, as far as I understand, the content of the website is also available to use in some other projects. What if, in just practical terms, some external project wants to use this open source code that you published online and repurpose it in its own, I don't know, for its own tasks and ideas. For someone who doesn't really know the technology, in a few words, how can you describe what possibilities and limitations with this code, with this open source tool, this external project would have? What can we do, for example, if we want to use it, and where we are limited?
Okay, well, this is a tough question because we are limited. What you can do, that's why also we use this Git repository, because it's what I show you is the simple part, and then there is a high development the deployment part, which you need to be aware of what you're doing. Also, you have to connect to a database, so it means that you have to run the database, etc. So what you can really do is using the part, for instance, to store the data. what do we have? We have always this intermediate format, data format. In this case, it's a CSV, or it can be a graph format or JSON format. So what you can do, you can prepare this to then visualize. So having you making use only of some modules, because even the front end, you need to plug in to an API with similar to what we have. So it is already something integrated. That's why we can publish it without a problem of copyright, because even to copy it, either is one of us who just know how it works, then he uses it for other projects, so it's a kind of economy and save resources, or it becomes a little bit more cumbersome, and then the code itself become more complex, because you have to adapt to other use cases. That's why what I really suggest is focusing on the data, like as Danilo said this morning, focusing on the content without worrying about everything else. And then anyway, there are ways to simplify the workflow. So but for that you need to know, to have quite a few skills. Now I know there are ways to install it, like you would install other software, like Docker, but then at the same time it makes things more complicated. So this is also the limitation.
Just one thing with a small remark with giants from Silicon Valley, because you know that the GitHub might be resolved. Yes, and that's may raise a lot of
there are other
questions.
Exactly.
I said, but like returning to the case. So the question actually, because I found that like there were like a lot of references to the program who was tracking the changes during the process flow, but from human beings who've been responsible for coordination, different sites and this process steps, because there were different levels, different steps, and who was actually, or you changed the responsibilities, who is responsible like for only coordination. Because it's like, I mean, you had a lot of, so you was.
She's the boss.
Only.
It's the octopus.
It's really amazing. Like, I mean, it's a lot of it. I mean, you look as a very nice team.
Expected to do something more?
Oh, you know this. I think in the end of this project, you will be like really split it with the wish not to see each other, or you'll be more friendly, more close, and so on. It's also interesting how much actually you use for this tracing and for tracing the changes, involved in the project, these different programs, but also have you used this kind of Slack or something like this, or you just
yes.
have your
We were using Slack.
Yeah, exactly, Slack, the system.
How many actually people been involved in like on the most rush time? When actually was the most rush time?
Yes, us three plus Matteo, and then
Lars, the test.
last three and yeah,
five, six people.
Yeah, 5, 6 people.
Good question. When was the rush time? And at what point of the project was the rush time?
One has been.
I think we were fixing stuff even in the morning of the launch. So
I know this experience. Yeah.
It was this kind of.
It's familiar. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you again. Thank you. It's brilliant.